Hey, good day. Hi, this is Greg Lewis, City Manager here in Lebanon. Welcome to Lebanon in Depth today. Today's one of the special days we have where we're going to explore what I think is a real game changer for Lebanon, and that's the Mascoma Greenway. And we have with us our Parks and Rec Director, Paul Coates. And then we have some really wonderful volunteers and some real leadership and supporters come here. And so we have a special guest that Paul's going to introduce, and Russ Herschel, and so this is great. And I think we'll start out by we always try to talk a little bit about how do we get the idea of even be involved in trails. I'll start. I have gone way back in my career on the issue of trails. Well, my first manager job was to be a manager of Beltrami County, Minnesota, which is in the upper north central Minnesota, about 75 miles from the Canadian line. I was surrounded by the Chippewa National Forest, and a great many trail clubs were in the area organizing trails. So as the county manager, I worked with trail clubs as they organized trails, and it was a beautiful setting and beautiful trails and multi-purpose trails, and it was really a great thing. There was many trails being designed, but one of the jewels in the crown was that Bemidji, Minnesota, which is if anybody watches the new series, which is kind of dark and ironic and violent. Fargo takes place in Bemidji, Minnesota, and there's Lake Bemidji's right in the center of the town, and I had a view of that lake from my office. And the attempt was to make a trail around the lake to walk on for citizens to enjoy recreation and walk around the trail. Well, that was a very tough climb because our people had already built along the lake, so this would mean a trail in their backyards. And so we had to work with that issue of reconciling and understanding why a trail is a safe and a very valuable thing for you as a person who may live on the trail versus being an intrusion into your lives.
Sure.
So that was an interesting process, and it was started back in 1990 when I began, and I went back to visit my daughter who returned to live there after she graduated from college in New York. They had completed it, and the lake is quite large. The lake is formed by the Mississippi River coming and spreading out and going far south. It had been completed, so the jewel had been completed, and there were people walking, and then I noticed there was people lived on the trail were also walking. It was just really family thing. So that's how I got into trails. Paul, nice. How about you?
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Georgia, and there happens to be a trail that connects Georgia to Maine. It comes right through Hanover, New Hampshire, and that trail changed my life because it actually brought me to New England. I never thought I would live up here. But I do. I lived here for 14 years now, so a whole community of people use trails, and I've made lifelong friends along the Appalachian Trail, and that's a bit more rustic than what we're going to be talking about today with the Mascoma River Greenway, but trails introduce a way of life that I'm very familiar with, and that I think a lot of people who live in our neck of the woods appreciate and want to be able to access, getting on something like the Appalachian Trail, going out to the White Mountains. But right here in our back doors, we have the rail trail. Anybody can use a rail trail. I don't care if you're, just learning how to run, or if you like riding your bike, if you want to push a baby in a stroller. With the Mascoma River Greenway, it'll be even for people who need like wheelchair accessibility and need to be able to get out on the trail. So that's what I really love about trails in general. There's something for everybody. Lebanon in particular has trails that are rough and for the seasoned trail traveler, right? If you want to go running or mountain biking, but then things like the rail trail where you can just see anybody who's a neighbor or meet new friends out there the whole time. So that's my experience.
How about you, Russ? How did you get into being a trail enthusiast?
Well, right now I work with the Upper Valley Trails Alliance, so that's sort of one way that I got involved. But I was a kid growing up in and around New York City, so I saw buildings and houses right next door at arm's reach out of my window. But I had a grandfather who loved the outdoors and would take me hiking and camping and go for nature walks, and it kind of blew my mind. So after I graduated college, I hit every trail that I possibly could. Spent most of my early time hiking out in the Rockies on the West Coast. But was drawn back here, same time about 14 years ago. And I used to do a lot more hiking up here, long distance hiking. Now I do short hikes because I have 2 young kids. But I do push them in strollers on trails,
Good.
and I get them out, and now they're just old enough where I don't have to carry them anymore. They can walk on their own.
That's nice.
And I've been doing that for 20 plus years now.
That's nice. That's nice.
20 years.
Well, today we have a lot of information we want to cover to be provide as much information as possible to the Lebanon community about this wonderful asset and this game changer. So why don't you tell the public, Paul, about what are we talking about, the Mascoma Greenway?
Good, yeah. Well, most people know about the Northern Rail Trail. That's the existing pathway that starts in downtown Lebanon near the CCBA Witherall Recreation Center on Spencer Street. And it heads like 50-something miles almost to Concord, and soon it will actually connect to Concord. So that's a cinder path most of the way. Most people in town have used it along the way, and if any listeners have not experienced the rail trail yet, then I encourage you to get out there this summer because it's a brilliant feature that any real estate agent, somebody who's trying to sell property in Lebanon, will almost always mention the fact that there's a rail trail nearby, because people come from all over the states to live near rail trails because they're all over the country. The Greenway will extend from where it currently ends by the Witherall Recreation Center 4 more miles to the west and connect Lebanon with West Lebanon. And it goes right through the heart of our city. And we'll reference a map in a little bit that the viewers can see, but it goes right through the heart of our city. And it will be a year-round, non-motorized, paved pathway accessible by any user and connecting, like I said, Lebanon to West Lebanon. Ultimately, the trail will pull out over by Seminary Hill School, which we hope to have a future community center there, and also down by the Powerhouse Mall. So it'll kind of split once it makes it to the Glen Road area near Riverside Community Park. So that's the vision for what it is, right? And like we said, as you see Mechanic Street connecting Lebanon and West Lebanon, Route 4, or also Mascoma Street, which goes by Alice Peck Day Hospital, connecting those 2 sides of town. This Greenway goes right between those 2 avenues and will be the only bike pedestrian facility that we have that connects the 2 sides of town.
Well, I think it's a brilliant opportunity now. There's a lot of people got involved. Russ, could you talk about your involvement and
Sure.
those in the people that are a part of your group and your teams that you've been working on trying to make a reality out of this situation?
Absolutely. So the Upper Valley Trails Alliance works in 43 communities across both sides of the river. And I came to the organization in 2008. My second day on the job at Lebanon City Hall, there was what we call the Trails Connect Forum. Over 100 participants came from many different communities, not just Lebanon. And it was an interesting spread of young people, older people, different modes of transportation. People like to walk, bike, run, ski. And they broke up into little groups and they were asked a series of questions. And one of the questions was, what's the #1 trail priority for the Upper Valley? And this was looking, again, beyond Lebanon from all over the 43 communities. And overwhelmingly, the #1 priority was extending the Northern Rail Trail to the Connecticut River. We again did the same kind of trails forum in 2010, asked the same question, and the same priority came out. The #1 priority for the Upper Valley is to extend the rail trail from Lebanon to West Lebanon, the Connecticut River. It was probably a year later than that that we really started to get the ball rolling. The city council invested some money in an action plan, which really has been guiding the process for the last 4 years or so. And that sort of has brought us up to here. So I don't want to go too much further yet, because I'm sure Paul may want to add to that. But we're doing things of removing rails and ties, raising money, bringing in hundreds and hundreds of volunteer hours, have a fabulous leadership committee that is really guiding this process.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And one thing that the trail is also accomplishing that was recognized through these trail forums that Russell mentioned is that not only is this thing a non-motorized pathway that's really built for the skiers, the walkers, the joggers, the bikers, but the fact that there's a lot of connection points that are going to be included in this. So the expectation is folks can get from their homes to the schools, to their workplaces, to the places where they want to shop, to the park systems, to places where they just want to sit and go birding or sit next to the Mascoma River. which is why it has some of the nomenclature that we have with it, Mascoma River Greenway. The Mascoma River flows right through our town, yet it tends to either be off the beaten path or behind buildings because we were a mill town. The trail is actually going to bring people to the river where you have many opportunities to sit there and just enjoy the scenic splendor that Lebanon does have.
And that's really, a wonderful quality of this project, because I know many people are river keepers, people that believe in the river is an essential part of a community, and of course the trails are an essential part of the community, and to bring the people and the river and the trail together is certainly a wonderful feature. I know we're doing the Mechanics Street reconstruction project. It is in the design stage now. Because the road, I ride it every day, and it is in pretty horrible shape, and it certainly deserves long overdue attention. And so that project is there, maybe 3 stages. So when we did this, we thought that one of the best approaches is we will coordinate and engineer so that we do this in a pathway type of approach, considering both the rail trail, the river, the construction of the street, and advanced transit is a very important part of that. Right. Be transit as well. So that'll give people greater choice, being able to use to walk, to as a bed, and to bike and use these various mechanisms you mentioned, and then they could ride the transit, and people have different stages of their lives. They have different situations, and so they could, basically take the transit, and then they could get off at one point and they could access the trail and then enjoy the trail, and then and at some point they could come back and access the transit again and go return home or go to another destination. So very much an integrated approach, and coming to the Connecticut River is really important to us. We want to strive to get there.
Right. Yeah. The connections is the biggest key to the whole thing, and one of the neat features that we've discovered in mapping out this whole trail is that over 50% of Lebanon's residents live within a half a mile of the trail, of the Mascoma River Greenway. And you extend that out even a little bit further, almost 2/3 of our residents live within 1 mile of the trail. 80% live within 2 miles. So we start to see that because our population is concentrated towards city centers and these neighborhoods that we have, that most people will be able to get on this trail without ever having to get into a car. Or anything else for that matter. And where they get off their advanced transit bus stops, the trail will be nearby.
And because we know that Lebanon is home to a lot of the major employers in the area, it'll also be a commuting corridor, keeping people off of the roads, lowering down pollution, greenhouse gases, so on and so forth. And we're going to have a safe place to ride and bike and recreate. And Greg, you mentioned earlier about the trail up in Minnesota, how it went through people's backyards, and that was sort of a prickly point, if you want to call it, when it was being built. Some of this trail does go through people's backyards. We've only had a minimal amount of negative feedback. Most people are positive about it. From our experience at the Trails Alliance, public trails that go through even public right-of-way, but it goes through people's backyards, it does not create the kind of conflict that some of the homeowners may think. And that's an important thing to recognize. And so we've had many, many discussions within our leadership group about how do we manage some of these things. And we're always open to answer any of those questions. So if any of the viewers out there are concerned about that, Paul's office is always open. You can always contact me at the Trails Alliance, and we'd be happy to navigate through some of those questions that you may have.
That's good.
That's a good point.
The unknown is always, you're trying to figure out what the unknown is, and sometimes in the unknown, the spectrums of what might be, that sort of thing gets in the way of kind of what is the more likely scenarios that you'll encounter, which the value in that is not as exposed are in a way that people sometimes first react to it.
Right.
But because I think people who lived on a trail like me and others and have experienced it in other places, and like you all know that's not the situation we have.
That's right. And some of the comments that we've gotten, especially from neighbors who have their properties adjacent to the trail, is it makes sense that they have these concerns, because if they look out behind their homes within the last 15, 20 years, they would say, I do see people back here, and they're not engaging in the kind of behavior that any of us would be really excited about. It's places where people go back and drink, and they just engage in behavior that we're not wanting to support.
Yep.
And so the idea of opening it up to more people kind of can bring this idea that we're going to see more of that kind of behavior going on. And one of the things that Russell is referencing here is saying that it's a little bit different than that. When we get to have these sort of conversations and as more people get to come out and experience the trail, we're talking about our neighbors being the ones who are going to travel this corridor more and more. And so we get this positive traffic where if I want to go, if I'm a person who's trying to do something that's a little bit shady, I don't want my mom and dad walking by as I'm doing these things. You're not going to go to the
place where other people are.
Right.
Right now, it's somewhat used, but not that well used. Once this is done, and it's going to happen in the next couple of years, it'll be a very safe place. And we've also given a lot of thought to safety. So making sure the police know their access points, how to get in and out, lighting in certain and all the on-off access points, making sure places to put trash. I mean, that's another concern for people. You know, if they're going to see beer cans or cigarette boxes or whatever it is in their backyards, well, no, we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. Right. And from our experience at the Trails Alliance, when we've had conflicts between users on trails, it's oftentimes the users of the trails that police themselves. So as Paul just alluded to, the more people we get out there, the more people are going to be more respectful of the surroundings.
Right.
Yeah, that's really nice. Now, could we talk a little bit about kind of the stages we're at now and the stages we might lie ahead? And
That'd be great.
What some of the things we might be thinking about doing currently and in the near future?
That'd be great. You want to talk about the financial parts?
I do. I just want to mention one thing. So the reason that it took us 4 years to even get this project started and off the ground is rail lines, while they may be privately leased, they are owned by the state and some in some ways managed by the federal government and Surface Transportation Board. So even though there has not been an active rail car on the section that we're talking about in the last 30 plus years, maybe more than that, it still took many, many years of negotiations to get the state and the federal government to deem this railway not only inactive but abandoned. These are terminology that we all need to know about. So it really took us a while to even be able to legally go out there and assess what's going on. So when we started the project, we set out based on some preliminary engineering estimates of approximately a $2.25 million campaign. And that would cover a series of expenses, everything from first going out and clearing the rails and ties, which we're working on right now, all the way to engineering the trail, building the on-off access points, and we were very strategic about where to put those as well. We wanted them in high traffic areas so people can take mass transit, then take their bike off the bus, get on the rail trail, and continue on wherever they're going to go. To signage, lighting, safety, and most importantly, and probably the thing that may take the longest, is retrofitting all of the bridges and the major tunnel underneath the Lebanon Mall. Those have to be done to certain specifications for safety reasons, which makes sense, especially the one that goes over the interstate, or the ones that go over the Mascoma River 50 feet up in the air. So there's going to be a lot of redecking and fencing to make sure that people stay safe, can't throw things off, people can't climb on in different places and that kind of stuff. So we've been working on each of these sort of stages piecemeal. And Paul, I'll let you actually talk about the phases. Good. But I could talk a little bit more to the funding aspect. So we are in the process of ending what we call our private phase of the capital campaign, and I'm happy to say that we've secured $1.6 million of the campaign so far, and some other larger donations are in the works trying to come through. And we're hoping that we can finish off with the fundraising aspect in the next 18 months to 2 years, ideally before that.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. I think we've all been overwhelmed by the success that we've had in this fundraising campaign.
That's fabulous.
It's important to note, too, that the $2.25 million campaign is kind of the idea of if this was a turnkey operation. So if we had a developer that said, hey, we want you to go build a trail right here and take care of everything, we would have to hand them $2.2 million, and they would do that. We, of course, are much more frugal as New Englanders here and want to get our own hands dirty and have many wonderful volunteers. So we cut things off like $15,000 worth of removing vegetation. Volunteers have done that. So we didn't need that cash to do it, but we've had in-kind donations have covered a lot of that figure that Russ just gave us. So that's been brilliant, and that includes a lot of money the city's been given through work crews and through our CIP campaign for the engineering that you mentioned. So we are entering into a public phase now where we have this remaining gap that we still need money for. Money does go into the bridges. It goes into also things like the rail. The rail would otherwise be viewed as very valuable because it's this heavy steel. A lot of places around the country get to take that steel and salvage it and get the cash for it, and sometimes that can fund the entire project. In New Hampshire, the steel is owned by the state and the rail companies, and it's of such a high value grade that actually works against us.
Yes, they want it all back.
They want it back, and so we have to pay money to have it removed in a way that's not going to damage it and give it back to the rail company. So it's a very expensive proposition that we can't have volunteers trying to lift these things up. That just doesn't work.
Right.
So there's a lot of money that does have to be raised to accomplish this work, the bridges, the tunnel. And so we're excited about what's coming up with that. So the phase work that we've been chatting about is we want to see a dirt pathway that reaches all the way across into West Lebanon. We would love to be able to see this by sometime in 2015. The first half of it, all the way up to what we call milepost 141, and that's right where we get to a river near Timken Aerospace. We have a dirt path that we'll have completed by this summer. So that's a huge progress, and we're going to have a connection path that goes up to Mascoma Street from that area very soon. So that's already progress, an extra mile of trail to travel down. Beyond that, we get to see the rest of the trail officially abandoned by the federal government, which is kind of a technical document that we need at the moment. And at that point in time, we get to work on 2 more bridges and then move on down the pathway. So there's a lot of work that we get to look forward to still right now. The removing of some of these rail, the I-89 bridge, the Slayton Hill Bridge, the downtown bridge where there's a small park behind Goss Logan Insurance, which is going to be one of the highlights of the whole trail, we believe. It's right by what we call Mascoma Falls, and it's a beautiful section of river. So those are a couple of phases that are happening right now, including linking behind City Hall, where the Northern Rail Trail currently ends, getting to that downtown bridge and tunnel. There's parking areas, and so we've got a great design for how to realign some of that so that the trail can safely travel through there without worrying about cars and all of those things.
That's good. Now, there may be people that are interested in getting involved and haven't been involved until this point. It sounds like there's lots of different ways that people might be of service, from giving money to get involved in the volunteer networks. How would they go about that? How would they begin to get involved?
That's a great question.
First contacts, or
so one great way of doing it is to come out to Colburn Park on Saturday, June the 7th, which is National Trails Day. And we don't want to miss out on that fun action, so we're having a celebration on Colburn Park. Free live music, food, a presentation about what's going on for the trail, and then actually a valley quest and guided walk down the trail. And during all of that time, several of us will be on hand to talk about ways that people can contribute, ways to get volunteer time on, get on some mailing lists so that you know when we're going to have work days, things of that nature. So coming out on Saturday, June 7th would be the most exciting way to start getting involved, or if for people who have already been involved to see more firsthand what's been going on again.
If a viewer wants to know what's going on right now, we have a website.
Yes.
Which is mascomagreenway.com.
Right.
So you can go check that out, and on there are ways to also give your name if you can't make it to the event on June 7th. Of course, cash is king, so donations will really get us to the goal. But there, as we said, there's lots of other ways to get involved, and we're going to need a lot of human power. Everything from picking up metal plates that were used to hold the rails together. The state wants those back. They need to be stockpiled and delivered back to Concord. To, as Paul mentioned before, hand clipping brush back. And then there's going to be lots and lots more days, especially constructing a lot of these side connectors that will go on. A lot of that will be started with hand tools.
Right.
So that's some of the ways you can get involved.
So everyone should mark June 7th.
June 7th at noon, that's right. And the whole day is quite exciting, actually, because well, you probably know of other trail projects going on in the Upper Valley. Here in Lebanon, there's also what's called the Jim Wechsler Bike Rodeo. And Bike Rodeo is kind of a funny name because nobody's getting bucked off a bike during the scene, but it's quite the opposite. We're going to have, there's a group down at the Witherell Recreation Center who are going to talk about bike safety, registering bikes. Yep. They have kids' bike helmets for dirt cheap, and Lebanon PD will be there to help do some of those things. So that's been an ongoing event, but we'd love for people to be able to check out the bike rodeo, then come up to Colburn Park at noon, and we'll have our event going on for a couple of hours.
That's nice. That's nice. What other important features of the project should we mention today that we haven't mentioned so far?
Well, I want to say that as someone who's not a Lebanon resident and who's been doing sort of trail work in the Upper Valley for 6.5 years now, I think Lebanon has become very progressive with regards to this project. I love the way the planning folks have been working with anyone who's trying to build or develop along the corridor, and asking them to really consider this in their plans, thinking of it as an economic benefit, not as a drawback. That's one of the ways that we talk about trails. Trails are an economic development opportunity. They drive up, they have a positive impact on real estate values. It does bring business and more people to the community. And I think Lebanon and the City Council and the employees and the Planning Department and obviously Recreation and you, Greg, you've all embraced it. And from an outside perspective looking to the city, I just think it's a wonderful thing. Yes. And it's a model that I think other communities can think about as well.
Right. I would add to that, one of the biggest appealing pieces of this whole project, as we've been working on it together for quite some time now, is that this is really a community project. It's a community benefit, and it's a community build. The city will own the project, certainly, but we're not going out there saying this is a City of Lebanon project. This is a community project, and it's going to be financed from the whole community. The entire community is going to be the benefactor of the trail. So having the privilege of working with our planning department hand in hand, working with the Trails Alliance, working with DHMC, working with Alice Peck Day Hospital, working with other private business owners in Lebanon, many of the residents who are around town, and even some of the non-residents. We have folks like Russell who don't live in Lebanon but see that this is a valuable piece of the Upper Valley Loop Trail, and seeing that benefit that's going to be for everybody, not just those who live within a half a mile of the trail.
Yeah, I can't wait to see a complete map. Someday, we have our map now, right, but it will be very interesting for to have a map of this whole area and showing how that trail is going to go through and what you might experience on that trail. One
of the great things that we get to do when we talk to people is to bring out the map, and as people are looking at the map, to be able to say, all right, I live right there, or I go shopping over here, or my friend's house is right over here, and this is where I go to school, and we can see how everything connects just by looking at the map. And people, I don't know, something cool about maps where people just get excited about recognizing different things. If you live in town or not, but I know that I can recognize something and I want to get to that place now. And so that's fun.
Nice. Yeah. That's nice. And I guess we have in terms of all our features, for getting to the Simhel school and have that be a community spot in the center, getting it down to the Powerhouse Mall.
Right.
We want to get it through West Lebanon to the river itself. We want to figure a way of working that through, and we've been looking at that rail yard, Westboro rail yard, and having quite a few discussions with the state as we go, and the community and the business in the neighborhood about trying to figure out a solution to that scenario to try to balance all the issues with the railroad and with the rail division of the DOT, of trying to work through and find a way to get there. And that would be, I guess, our vision thing is always trying to, when we have a flyover, which I always talk about having flyovers somewhere in the future, whether it's 2030, which is the completion of the city master plan and seeing where we stand, or simply the completion of the trail, what that flyover is going to look like. And I think people should imagine what it would look like to the community and how it would feel to have your family and your businesses and your children be able to experience that kind of trail from the Connecticut River on to connecting with the Northern Rail Trail.
Yeah.
I think that would be
great
a good
vision.
feeling.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned sort of the whatever time frame it is, the 2030 master plan. And trails don't get built overnight; they don't happen by themselves. It takes years and years and years. I mean, as I alluded to before, and even before my time, Paul's predecessor at Parks and Rec, Cindy Heath, had been working on this project for 10 years before. Right. So this has been in the works for a long time, and we're actually, Greg, before you said they actually got the trail up in Minnesota done. Well, I used to say, if this gets done in my lifetime, or if my tenure at the Trails Alliance, but it's actually going to get done.
Right.
And it will create a backbone for an entire trail network over the next 20 to 30 years. This is going to be the center of where things come and go from.
Yeah.
That's a good closing thought, Russ. How about you, Paul, your closing thought?
I just love to see people come out and enjoy this thing with us and go for a journey. And if people are saying, I don't know really where it's going or can't understand it, hey, nothing would give me greater joy in my day than say, I'll take you on a trip.
And make sure you call me, Paul.
All right, I'll do that.
Well, today we close then. Remember June 7th. It's an opportunity to get to know more. Come out and enjoy. It's a fun, very fun event. It's a good thing for a family, good for an individual. Come on down to Coburn Park on noon on that day. I know people that are trail enthusiasts who are masters on trails, and what kind of personalities they develop, and the patience and the persistency and the endurance and the wherewithal from a healthy point of view of living life. So this is what's going into creation. These people that are helping create it are people of that ilk. And that's how we think this trail is going to be for all of you. So great place for you to enjoy the essence of a good life. So we look forward to you joining us on the trail. Great. So that's it for Lebanon. But remember, try to do all you can to support the Greenway.